Hey guys, Buffy Game back today, bringing out a video for our Modern Warfare 2 weapon wishlist video part 6. I will link 1 through 5 down below in the description. Today we're going to be focusing on part 6, which is going to be launchers, as well as some items that I missed, honorable mentions, things like that. We have a few assault rifles, grenade launchers, and some sniper rifles in there as well. So if you didn't check out the previous parts, definitely go back. I'll link those down below. Part 1 through 5, we went through assault rifles in part 1. Part 2, we went through LMGs. Part 3 was mainly SMGs and PDWs. Part 4 was snipers and DMRs. And Part 5 was shotguns. So go ahead and check those out down below. Especially in Part 1, I go into the original concept for what I believe, based on some leaks, that this will look like the system, at least for Modern Warfare multiplayer, with a point system similar to Insurgency Sandstorm. That way, when we look at balance, damage profiles, recoil, things like that, when weapons seem to be broken, instead of waiting for a full-blown statistical balance patch, they can just increase the amount of points. That way there's a pros and cons. So if you want that truly high-end weapon that's quote-unquote meta, you would have to sacrifice something within a point system in order to build that out, that full kit. And you have to sacrifice whether it's a sidearm and or a few perks along with that. So go ahead and check that out. Go more in depth in that, mainly in part 1. Jumping into this here today, we're going to cover, like I said, the launchers, grenade launchers, some honorable mentions, and then we'll be moving on after this video to mainly the operators and factions with wish lists, things like that that I would expect to see in bundles coming in here to Modern Warfare 2, given that we do have 2 years of support. Be seeing things like perhaps Ukrainian Special Forces operator packs, different Russian operator packs, Navy SEAL operator packs, things like that that I would expect us to see in the store, as well as weapon blueprints that those would come with, things like that. So jumping right into it today, we're going to be covering launchers to start, that being the FGM 148 or 148 Javelin. So if you've been paying any attention to what's going on in the world lately, the Javelin is one of the key weapons being utilized by the Ukrainian military and SOF against the Russian military in the war in Ukraine. The Javelin, obviously, we've seen this in previous Call of Duty titles in the past. Just about almost all of the Modern Warfare titles, I believe, the Javelin has made the appearance in. And obviously, this is a fire and forget missile system. Automatically locks on using infrared guidance and will shoot up and come down, top down on the tank. So obviously, this is something I would expect us to see in Modern Warfare 2. Especially if a lot of leaks are correct. I think we'll see some returning weapons, which we covered in the previous video. So the Javelin, definitely one that I would expect to see make a return. Next up, another weapon that I think we've seen quite a lot of coverage on if you've been paying attention to what's going on in Ukraine, that being the NLAW, or the Next Generation Light Anti-Tank Weapon. So the NLAW, also known as the NBT Law or the RB57 with the Swedish terminology, that being a lock-on anti-tank missile system. This one utilizes it is shoulder fired. It's only a one fire, so you cannot reload this. So basically, you need to get them. They come loaded. We'll link below a really good video from Task and Purpose where he did a lot of in-depth analysis on this weapon, the origins, how it works, and the amount of different countries that went into creating this, and really probably why we won't see any of the United States enemies utilizing something like this system, because it was a joint country initiative in order to make this weapon happen. So this is, like I said, a disposable single-use line-of-sight missile system utilized by infantry, and it will lock on similar to the Javelin, but it will use more of a predicted line of sight to carry out top-down attacks on tanks. It does basically have a thermal imaging system which recognizes the shape of the tank and where to explode above the tank in order to inflict the most damage. So the NLAW, definitely something I would expect us to see. Again, this was a joint weapon, mainly with Sweden, United Kingdom. I think there was Japan also created a lot of the ship systems that were utilized within the missile itself. So go ahead and check out that video from Task and Purpose. I'll link that down below in the description. The NLAW would be another really good shoulder fire rocket anti-vehicle type system to see in Modern Warfare 2. Next up, because if we're assuming the leaks are going to be true here, and we are going to be fighting in Colombia against the cartels, I would expect to see a classic RPG-7. We've seen the RPG-7, that old Soviet-era RPG, in pretty much every modernized FPS shooter to date, especially in the Modern Warfare series. So the RPG-7, again, another anti-tank launcher. This one, obviously, these don't lock on to anything, but because we will be having some missions, most likely, if the leaks are true, in Colombia against the cartels, I would expect this to be something we see the cartels utilizing. Another follow-up to that here would be the RPG-26 and or the RPG-30. So these are more modernized variants of the RPG. Obviously, the RPG-26 in service from 1985 and the RPG-30 in service from 2012. These are also disposable anti-tank launchers, so these would be utilized against enemy tanks as well. And this would be something I would expect to see if we see the Russian forces like Spetsnaz, things like that, introduced into the game. Instead of having them utilize the RPG-7, we would have a more modernized RPG system like the 26 or the 30. Again, this is something we do see a lot of use by the Ukrainian SOF, if you've been looking at some of the footage on Instagram, social media, and the news as well. So these more modernized RPGs as well as the classic RPG-7 definitely be a good addition to the game. Next up, one more launch here, that being the Panzerfaust 3. So again, this is another one that we're seeing a lot of use, in Ukraine right now. Germany just sent a bunch of these over there as well. The Panzerfaust 3, again, is a German rocket launcher, more modernized version of the Panzerfaust utilized that you may know from World War II. And again, this is a disposable anti-tank rocket, similar to the RPG system. Point and shoot, it's not a lock-on system, I do not believe, and I don't really think we've seen a modernized Panzerfaust in Modern Warfare for quite a long time. I know we do have it in Insurgency Sandstorm, but a Panzerfaust 3 would be a really nice system to see in the game, especially if we have something like a German KSK, faction packs, operator packs, things like that. Having a Panzerfaust 3 or even a blueprint that cosmetically changes one of the similar launches into that would be pretty cool. Now moving on to more of our miscellaneous items here. We'll jump into the grenade launchers to start. So first off, the M203. The M203 is one of those classic grenade launchers, underbarrel grenade launchers that we've seen in all of the Modern Warfare series, typically on the underslung Picatinny of the M4A1 as well as the M16, all the way back to COD 4, obviously with the M16 in that game, as well as an attachment for some of the M4s, and we've seen it in Modern Warfare 2019. Another iteration of that would be the M320. This one, instead of sliding the grenade launcher open and placing it around inside, this one kind of cocks to the side and you slide it in. This can also be a portable one, does not need to be slung on the underbarrel Picatinny of the rifle itself. This can be a standalone grenade launcher, similar to what we saw, I believe it was in Battlefield 3 and Battlefield 4. The M320 can be utilized as something that you are carrying on sling as well. Maybe opt for that instead of a pistol, or you would opt for it on the underbarrel of your weapon. Obviously, that would cost additional points, and you'd have some pros and cons to that as well. So that would be a good way to balance that. Also depend on the damage profile. And a similar one here being the FN40GL. This would be the one that we see on the underbarrel of the Scar H and Scar L, or the Mark 17 and Mark 16. So the FN40GL, again, we did see this one, as well as some of the 320 systems in Modern Warfare 2019. I would expect we see those return with a lot of the assault rifles, mainly in Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2 2022. And then some honorable mentions that we may have skipped out on in the previous videos. First off, that we're going to be covering the AK-5C. So the AK-5C, we did touch upon this a little bit in some of our Cold War videos. The AK-5 is a Swedish assault rifle that was implemented or put into service in 1986. And the Swedish military needed to obviously update that. So what they did is they created an updated version, a more modernized modular version of that rifle, being the AK-5C. So the AK-5C, again, like I said, very modular looking version of the AK-5. A lot of improvements with this rifle. Very polymer type look to it. It has Picatinnies, as well as a collapsible foldable buttstock, and again, a much more modernized look than the AK-5C in the version that we saw in Cold War. You could kind of make a conversion to the AK-5C with the Cold War variant, but again, we don't have the modernization modularity that you do see here on the weapon in real life. So there's a lot of features that were added to this to bring this thing up to spec. It does have the wrist system integrated into it as well. So the AK-5C is a really aesthetically pleasing rifle that I think would be pretty cool to see. And again, that's going to be firing 5.56 by 45 millimeter NATO, same as a lot of the standard NATO type ARs that we do see utilized in the game. Next up, this is actually a requested one from the community, one that I originally had on my list but took off just because I'm not the biggest fan of the aesthetic looks of this weapon. However, it is actually a really cool weapon. I know Grand Thumb did a video on this, I believe sometime within the past year, that being the Beretta ARX 160. This is a weapon that we also saw in, I believe it was Battlefield 4. This is an Italian assault rifle firing the caliber of the 5.56 by 45mm NATO, and also more recently introduced a 7.62 by 39 variant of the weapon in 2015. So I think that's a trade up there. You either pick one or the other. I don't think there really should be a conversion of that because there will be a lot of weapons firing both calibers. So similar to what they did with the Galil Ace in Modern Warfare, they should really just pick one of the calibers. In this case, whether it's 7.62 by 39mm or the 5.56 by 45 NATO. That way it would have more of a balance, have different customizations, and that could come custom with the GLX 160 grenade launcher as well, which is that 40 by 46 NATO grenade launcher that goes on the underslung of the ARX 160. Again, a really nice, interesting looking weapon, depending on which particular versions you're looking at. 16-inch, 12-inch barrels, firing that 5.56 by 45mm NATO and the 7.62 by 39mm at around 700 rounds per minute. So let me know what you guys think of that weapon. Moving on, we're going to be covering the... This is one that I initially had on the list as well, but took off because it really wasn't relevant anymore. But because we're covering Modern Warfare 2, it does make sense for nostalgia purposes to bring this back. That being the Magpul Masada or the Remington/Bushmaster ACR. So obviously this made its debut in the original Modern Warfare 2. The only reason you would include this is for a good callback for the ACR. This would obviously be the more modernized version or up-to-date version of this with all the improvements from Remington and Bushmaster. So this particular one would be firing against similar case to what we just talked about with the ARX 160, either 5.56 by 45mm NATO, 7.62 by 39mm, a 6.8 Remington SPC would be a good addition, and a 308 AAC Blackout. So probably something along the lines of a 5.56 by 45mm with maybe that conversion to a 300 Blackout would be pretty interesting for this weapon. Again, very nice, aesthetically pleasing weapon. Very modular, especially when you have it decked out with all the rails, attachments, things like that. It looks beautiful. This obviously was initially meant in the early 2000s it was in the running to replace the M16 M4 platform. Ran into a lot of issues, mainly one where you pulled the trigger once and it just kept firing all the bullets on full auto. Bit of an issue there. There had to be a total recall of the weapon. Big rework within Bushmaster and Remington, and obviously we know the history of that. This was obviously not selected to replace the M4, and here we are in 2022 with the NGSW program ongoing to potentially replace that system again, but we'll have to wait and see. But again, the ACR, one of those nostalgic weapons. That's really the only reason you have it in the game. If you have it in the game, should be something maybe come at the very end or closer to the end of the life cycle of the game. I think it would be interesting to see, especially all decked out with all the attachments. It is really nice looking. Next up, the Accuracy International AS50. So this is a interesting sniper rifle that I forgot to put on the initial list, and you could replace the M82 from Barrett with the AI AS50. That way you don't have two semi-auto sniper rifles like that, or you put one of the bolt action, like I think it's the M99 from Barrett in there, instead of the M82 or the M82A1 series or the M107, and you replace it with the Accuracy International AS50. That way you don't, like I said, you don't have two semi-auto 50 BMG rifles. Now, this is a product of England or the UK. This is a semi-auto sniper rifle with a very accurate 1.5 MOA, firing that 50 BMG, and the rate of fire on this thing is crazy. It's utilized mainly by British Armed Forces and the Navy SEALs. So the rate of fire on this semi-automatic is around 5 rounds in 1.6 seconds. Now, it's able to do that with a free-floating barrel. It's a very, very cool looking weapon, and I think this would be a good option to replace, like I said, the M82 or the M107 with this. And from Barrett, you can put in the bullpup or the bolt action M99 instead. But the AS50, really cool weapon, and I think we saw this potentially in some previous Call of Duties. Correct me if I'm wrong there, but this would definitely be a cool addition to see added into the game. Design and production took place in 2007, so this is obviously a newer rifle than the M107, M82. This would be a good addition to the game. Last but not least, one machine gun that I forgot, the MG68. This is part of 6 Hour's entry into the NGSW program. Now, we did mention the MG338 in the light machine gun video, but I don't believe I mentioned the conversion for this, which I should have. So this is obviously the bid to primarily replace things like the SAW platforms, that squad automatic weapon. This would be firing the same caliber as the NGSW assault rifle bids, that 6.8 by 51 millimeter round, which would be that hybrid of the 7.62 by 51. So this is something that will probably end up replacing the SAW in some capacity in the future. And then its bigger brother would be the MG338. So the easiest way to do that is take the MG338 or the RAL that we saw in Modern Warfare 2019 and have a conversion to slim it down a little bit, make it a little bit more compact, and change the caliber to the 6.8 by 51 millimeter. That's the end of our wish list here for all the weapons here at Part 6. Let me know if I missed anything. Throw it in the comments down below. Let me know your thoughts of this weapon wish list if you've watched all 6. Let me know what I forgot and what you'd like to see added. Definitely, I think we probably are going to see some more older firearms utilized by the, if we are, in fact, like the leaks are suggesting, fighting the Colombian cartel. We will probably be seeing some older Soviet-era weapons, things like that in there as well. But from a nice weapon perspective in Modern Warfare 2, I would expect to see a lot of these type of modern type weapons in the game. So let me know what you guys think down below. Till next time, this is Buffner Gaming, out.